thanks for coming. Hopefully we'll be able to address some of the questions you have. We're going to roll through a little bit of a PowerPoint, and then we have a couple sample documents to roll through a little bit. We're going to have all of this stuff available in a Google Drive folder. So you don't, I know the new way of taking notes, everybody taking pictures of the slides while they're up. You don't have to do that. You can just focus on whatever we're presenting or whatever questions you have. The PowerPoint that we delivered the first day of your class when we did the intro is going to be in there. The grading sheet that we use will be in there. And then the sample task book document will be in there as well. All right. Like we said before, it doesn't matter which class you're in, but this one's focused towards the current class. This QR code to the Google Drive folder. You want to do that now? Great, it's already set up. There's already stuff in there. Those of you online, I was trying to get away from the screen just a little bit. For those of you that are online, if you want to screenshot it or whatever, you still have the same access as everybody else. I'm sorry. Stay close. I was just trying to stay away so that they could take their pictures. All right, everybody, still going? All right, we can always circle back. There is a JCAR rule, 141-316, that outlines the requirements for chief fire officer. I am hoping that you have all seen this, been exposed to it at some point, but if you need to find it, I have the JCAR rules set up as a favorite on my desktop because I'm in there all the time, but this is the one that's pertinent to what you guys are working on. Is everybody in here in the class right now? Or there's some people from before, the before times? Okay. You should be able to have access to anything that isn't the right application. In some of the previous classes, mine included the application changed 3 times while I was in the class. It was difficult to stay on top of which was the most current version that I needed to submit. This would be the only one you have. Everybody has this. You've been working on it. You know where it is. It's buried in your magic machine someplace. If you need a copy of it, let me know, and we'll make sure that the blank is in that Google Drive folder as well. When you look through that task book, it's laid out in a particular order, and it's not that that's the right order, but it's in an order so that the evaluators can keep track in an organized way that everybody's stuff is set up the same way. So when you're adding your supplemental documentation, whether that's resumes, letters of reference, copies of policies, whatever it is that you're plugging into that document, put it into the section where it belongs. As opposed to, I've seen some where it's all of that stuff is at the front, or it's all at the back, or it's in a separate PDF altogether. If we can try to do that, and I know everybody has different technological abilities based on your personal skill level or just software that's available to you at home. So there's different ways that you can work around that. If you have the full Adobe suite, you can just plug things in wherever they need to be. If you need to complete it in Word, print it out, plug all the other stuff in, and then scan it back in, that's cool too. If you use something else that's online, however you get from point A to point B that works the best for you is the way that you should do it. Your answer should be in first person. It shouldn't be the department does this or my colleagues do that. It should be I do this thing and I do this. This is how I do it. In my role as a lieutenant, a captain, a battalion, whatever rank you happen to be, this is how I function within this particular job performance requirement. Make sense? Okay. And as I have now evaluated a few of these myself, I am, I feel pretty lax on grammar, punctuation, spelling, things of that nature, because I know these applications are coming in from all around the state. We have different ways of talking and different ways of communicating with each other. But I am absolutely the grammarian about whom your mother warned you. It's chief officer level. When you're writing this stuff, even if you are not the chief officer, you should be writing it as though you are, with that kind of attention to detail. I'm not saying we're not going to knock off for bad spelling or if you miss a comma or anything like that. But when we're going through it, it adds to the professionalism of the document. It sounds like you guys are doing plenty of writing, so that should be fine. Should be as a single PDF, like I mentioned, however you get there. We have this great scanner at the firehouse. I can put in like 100 sheets and it scans it in about 3 seconds and emails me a single PDF. If you have something like that, that's cool. If you don't and you need a scanner, hit me up. Meet me at the fire station and I'll help you work through it. Your current supervisor needs to sign it. For some of you, that will be the fire chief. For some of you who happen to be the fire chief, it might be your village manager, your mayor, president of the trustees, depending on your form of government. So whoever your boss is, your direct boss, needs to sign. So in my case, move closer. I gotta move closer. Sorry, I'm trying to not stand in front of the screen too. All right, we'll just let that one be. We're doing March 1st and September 1st for the submission dates. Needs to be in. Bill, are we doing midnight on the 1st or like as long as it's by the close of business on the 1st? As long as the 1st is in there someplace in the body of that email when you email it to Bill, we'll take it. If you don't get it in by the 1st, you'll have to wait until the next submission period. And there used to be different dates, and we may have presented different dates at the very beginning of your class, but then we saw how your class was scheduled, and you're not going to be done until after the submission date. So we bumped it back out to help accommodate you guys, and knowing that this is the way that these programs are going to be marching out moving forward. Everybody's cool with what a JPR is? Awesome. All of the JPRs in your current document came directly out of NFPA. We didn't make anything up. We didn't add anything else. We didn't take anything away. It's all Fire Officer 3 and Fire Officer 4 JPRs. For those of you that might be in here from previous class, you know that the grading system was different, offered a lot more subjectivity to how those points were awarded. Now it's going to be all or nothing. Every GPR is worth a point. If you did it, whatever it happens to be, you're going to get the point. If you can't articulate how you did it, then you're not going to get the point. This is what the point breakdown looks like so that you know going into this, hopefully, even at the time, and I feel like you guys there right now. At the time you submit this, you should basically know what you're going to get out of it. If you feel you have documented, whether it's through copies of SOPs, SOGs, policies, budget worksheets, whatever it is that you populate into there, and you know if you're doing the job. So if you can articulate that to us, that we see that you're doing it, it's not, hey, I've done budgeting, but I've only been a deputy for a year. We're not going to come back and say, oh, well, you need more experience doing budgeting. That one time wasn't enough. Our anticipation is that if you've done it, hopefully, if you didn't bollocks the whole thing up, you're going to keep doing it. Your bosses are going to let you keep doing it, and you're just going to get better at it. So you'll get the point. If you have questions, like I said, Bill and I both have our cards here. If you're, again, you'll have access to this if you want to scan for QR stuff too. So that's one way to get a hold of us. And then we're going to take a look at some of the stuff. All right, so rid of that. Let me get rid of that. Oop. All right, we'll just leave it there. So this is what the cover of your task book should look like. It should have November 2022 at the very bottom of it, because that's when we put it together. The introduction, all the same stuff that you guys have seen. There's nothing new here. Your reference list. And then we get into this. Does anybody have any questions so far about like this first section, this kind of who you are and where you come from section? Pretty straightforward. Check the boxes. This is, you know, you include all the stuff, making sure that at least one of your letters of reference comes from your direct supervisor. That's really important. You can have more than one letter of reference from people in your own organization, but at least one needs to come from your supervisor. Basically, the person that's signing off on this thing.
And for those of you, for the your fire officer 2 or your advanced fire officer, or your provisional fire officer 3 or whatever the situation is, we don't need all of your other certifications because we know what you already have. We just need to show that you're qualified. So if you have to have the fire officer 2, that is a requirement, or advanced technician, advanced fire officer. You have to have that to be able to get your CFO. So that's the only certification that we need, that you need to make a copy of. We don't need 150 certifications that you guys have went through. We don't need any of that, but we will need the 300 and 400 copies of that as well.
Correct. The way it works with IFSI is you have to, and with anybody else that may deliver this class in the future, you have to meet whatever their minimum requirements are. So they'll have an exam. They are apparently having a lot of writing assignments that you have to complete. That is their jam. They are the delivery mechanism. We're the certification. So once they put you on that course completion roster, we receive this task book, this application, running on an assumption that you get full points. That's when you would be eligible for certification. All those things they have to all. All right. Personal information. This kind of gets a little bit all over the board. Some people, for their address, they put the firehouse address. I got to say, I'm not overly concerned one way or the other with that. I think some of this is still just a carryover from how the old application process worked.
One thing I would like, though, is for your personal, if you got a personal email, give me that. If you got a fire department email, give me that. That's your own email, because sometimes the emails that are on here get kicked back, and I start sending you guys emails. We need stuff, and that's how the communication a lot of times will go. So if we have 2 email addresses, that'll be perfect. If you don't, that's fine as well. But if at all possible, please try to give us your personal and your fire department one, so that we can get a hold of you if we have to.
In the part B about your employment information, the last 2 things about rank, like Bill talked about earlier, we are not going to be hung up on what rank you currently hold at your fire department. If you're a lieutenant, there is every possibility that you may be working or have assignments that put you way outside your general job description. It's that 15% of other duties is assigned. You may be doing chief officer level work and not be a chief officer. So I put in 2-star fire general and 3-star fire general because I got a kid on my department that wants to be a 2-star fire general. I think it's the funniest thing in the world. But to the point, we don't all use the same rank structure either. So if you're using privates and sergeants because that's how your organization rolls, cool. Just explain to us what that means. I come from a department of firefighters, paramedics, engineers, lieutenants, captains, and then the chief. So I never had battalion chiefs. So, you know, we're all kind of learning together. If there is any question, just explain. Hey, This is who I report to. This is what their rank means if it's something maybe just a little bit outside of the norm. Some of this other stuff is just to get us to know who you are and a little bit more about your organization, because there's 1,200 departments in the state and we don't know all of them. So it gives us a chance to get to know a little bit more about you. Yeah, I don't care if your budget's $1 million or $100,000, you still have to manage it. The letters of reference. Again, there are not points associated with this, but you got to fill it out. It's got to be complete, but we're not going to make you do any more or less based on any education that you may have, formal education.
And if you have 4 education up there, if you got a master's, a bachelor's, and associate, you can mark all 3 boxes. You know, then you've got all 3 of those degrees and everything else. So if you got anything up there, mark it. If you want your highest level of experience, though, to where you're at currently, or your highest and your length of service, and that can be at different levels as well.
The signature, depending on how you're going to deal with this document, if you save it as a PDF, your supervisor can use a secure PDF signature, not just like a, hey, we opened it up in Word and we chose a cursive-y looking kind of font and had them sign it. I see that all the time. That's not a secure signature. We have no way to validate that that's where that really came from. Something like this, at least it's stamped. If there was ever anything that got called into question, we could either go back to the supervisor, we could look at the metadata attached to the file. There are some things we can do to validate that signature. If you're going to do a wet signature, that's cool too. Print it out, have them sign it, and then scan it back in. However you get there, again, is entirely up to you.
2 quickest ways to get your application rejected: not have a letter of reference from your supervisor, and not having him sign this. It'll get sent back to you immediately. That has to be done. So those 2 are 2 critical areas that normally a lot of people sometimes they miss.
I'm not necessarily going to hit on each one of these JPRs, but what I did was in the section here where it says document, I just tried to give some examples. Hey, if you're doing these things, this is what you should be plugging into this area. If it's a section on budgeting and you worked on the budget, it might be the fire department budget. It says divisional budget. So maybe you're a training chief and you just had to deal with the training budget. Cool. What does that look like? What kind of money did you start out with on your line item in the fire department budget? Maybe give us a page out of that section of your budget. And then, hey, these are the things we're planning on doing with it this year. And I get it. It changes over the course of the year. So just because this is what you submit may not mean this is exactly what happened, because you had to pivot. A class got canceled, so some of that education money, got focused over to buying a prop or something like that. But explain how you deal with those types of things and show us some type of an example of how that happens.
The 6s are fire officer 3. The 7s will be fire officer 4. I suggest that you answer all of them, because you have to meet all of the 3s to at least get provisional. If you fall short on some of the 4s, you need all of the 3s and all the 4s to be full certified. If you miss some of the 3s, the best you're going to get is a course completion at the time, but you'll at least know what you need to improve on and everything else. And Chris has got some other examples up here, and the more information you can give us, or even samples or attachments that will better help the evaluators determine if you're doing that job or not, the better off that you guys will be.
If there's some in here for communication, if you have to go speak at a board meeting or you go speak at a pub ed event, depending on where it falls in with the JPRs, and somebody videoed it. A lot of places are recording their village board meetings. If you can get your hands on it, or if it's published to the village's YouTube page or something like that, include a link to the video, and just say, hey, I come on at minute whatever, because some of these things are really long. I was trying to use an example of a Chicago city council meeting, because I figured that's got to be good for a chuckle for everybody. But it was like 3 hours long. Like, if you're going to put the link and it's a 3 hour long video, I would rather not have to scrub through 2.5 hours to find the 30 seconds that you're in it. So just let us know where you're at. And that's great documentation. If there was another one, there was a news story about a crew that went out to a school and was doing pub ed. Hey, there you are on screen. Yes, part of a news story, great. But you're out there, you're doing it. So anything like that, whatever you have that documents your experience, you can think outside of that proverbial box a little bit and explain to us how you do what you do. We're not looking for a right answer or a wrong answer. If it comes to how your department hires, assigns, maintains, and does continuing education, I don't know, there's 20-something people in the WebEx, and there's another 20 in here. I bet you I'd get 40 completely different answers. Because everybody does their, we're all in the fire service doing the same thing, but we're all doing it a little bit different. So while there might be similarities, I'm not going to tell you that the way you do it is right or wrong. I just need to know how you do it. Anybody have any questions so far? Because this is kind of where we're at. I'm happy to show you the grading sheet that we're going to use, which is this guy here. So like I said, everything is a point. It works out the whole thing to what, 59 points? Because I couldn't figure out anywhere to put one more point to make it an even 60. I tried because that really bothers me. Yeah, the name should count as one. Yeah. The organizational chart. You should be represented on that chart somewhere. Highlight it. If you print it out, write your name next to it or your rank or however that looks. Your job description. If you work in a small department and maybe you don't have formalized job descriptions, write one. If you're looking for documents that don't exist in your organization so that you can complete some of these JPRs, create them. If it's a SOG, SOP, I know we all call these things different things, and one doesn't exist and you think one should, even if only for the purpose of getting through this program successfully, write one up. Submit it to your chief, submit it to your boss for consideration. Say, hey, you know what? I learned this thing in this class I'm taking for the last 13 months, and we don't have this thing. Maybe we should. Maybe they adopt it, maybe they don't. But you fulfilled the requirements of the JPR because you went through the research, you went and you figured it out. Degree or transcripts, one or the other. We don't need both. If you don't want us to see that you got a C in algebra, that's cool. Just send us a copy of your diploma. Like Bill said, copies of your certificates for your ADFO or Firefighter 2, Fire Officer 2, your ICS 300, 400, document of 10 years of service. Generally, that's going to be covered pretty well, but we can double check that off your portal records as well. Course completion, we're going to see in the portal. The state written exam, we're going to see in the portal. And then the submission of this task book, obviously, is just by us getting it from your submission. And this is how every page looks. Like part B has 3 parts, so it's 3 points. Let's hold on a second.
Go back to the first. So what will happen so that you guys understand the progression of your application? So once you guys submit this, it will go to our office staff. They will look through this and make sure that all of that information is there. Once that's completed, so they may be sending it back to you and say, hey, we don't see your ICS 3 and 400 or your command and general staff certificate anywhere. So they send it back. You go, oh, I haven't taken the class yet. Well, your application is not complete from the very first point. It will get rejected until that is completed. So it will get sent back to you. So if you don't have all this stuff checked off, your application will stay right there. It doesn't go any further. So it'll get sent back to you. You'll know why. Once this is completed, then it goes to the next step where then it will start going to the evaluators and they will get assigned out. We have a channel set up in Teams that all of your applications and stuff will be set up in there and then assigned out. Les Albert, who's on the call or on the WebEx right now, he's the chair of this, and he looks over this and he assigns these out to all of the evaluators that we have, and then they will start the process. But please realize that this has to be completed before we go any further. So if you haven't passed your exam or you haven't been put on the course completion roster, this will set. That's IFSI will submit those course completion rosters, and that will not get submitted until you have passed that exam. So make sure that you see that on the portal, that that course completion has been submitted, and you see that before you send that application in, because otherwise it will get rejected and will stay there until this is 100% complete right here. Yes, sir.
I think you said in the first meeting, before class started, they give 3 years. So let's say you're missing ICS 1, but you got everything else done. You submit your test clock, and then you have 3 years to get done ICS.
You have 3 years to get the ICS, 300, 400 before you would have to take the whole thing over again. So you've got plenty of time to get that submitted and all that. And then, what was it? We gave them 5 years for the submission and to pass the exam, I believe. Yeah, I'd have to look. It's in the JCAR rule. So, so if you guys have any questions, go to the JCAR rule. But that will, like I said, if you're missing that, just hang on to it. You can still have everything else done and ready to go if you know that that's all that you need to meet. So, but this has to be 100% before they move forward. And they will be checking to make sure that you have the resume, one from your supervisor, and that application is signed by your supervisor. They will be checking all of that stuff. And like I said, so you may get feedback from some of the office staff, probably Mary or Lindsay or Janet, maybe sending that back to you saying, hey, you're missing this. We need you to attach that and send this back. So if you hear from them, you'll know why.
Chris, I have a couple of questions for those folks online. We're going to get to your 2 questions. William asks, what are the requirements for a degree? Is there a minimum, i.e. diploma, associate's, bachelor's?
None. No minimum.
Michael asks, so we still need to obtain ICS 300, 400, wait to submit, ?
Yes.
So they say yes, Michael, that you need to obtain those, wait to submit. Anybody else have any questions online? All right, hearing none.
And you guys realize that the command and general staff is 300 and 400. So you don't have to take 300 and 400 and command and general staff. You can take the 300 and 400 individually, or you can take the command and general staff, which meets the ICS 300 and 400.
Hey, Chris, can you repeat that one more time, or Bill, about the ICS 300, 400, or general?
Command and general staff, which is only offered through IFSI currently, meet the requirements for ICS 300 and 400. It's one combined certificate.
All right, Michael, does that help with your question? Does that answer it? He says yes.
What are the questions for level of experience? I got a captain, but I do work it. Are you acting? Yeah. Or you're a captain, but you work in the capacity? We call it lieutenant captain. Okay. So I don't act. Oh, yeah, I would just explain it that way. Yeah, I would put myself at that level.
Don't submit your job description at what your current level is, not at what, that if you're acting up a couple days here and there and stuff, what you're currently doing, and then you can explain better what, that you're working out rank periodically, and here's some of your other job descriptions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And as long as your job description reflects that, then yeah. Okay. If you do submit and for some reason don't get the full certification, you end up with provisional, and you have to resubmit later, please save all of the work you have done on this application somewhere. Whether it's a PDF, multiple Word documents, multiple folders, files, whatever. And then when you resubmit at a later date, maybe it's September, maybe it's the following March, All you need to do is add something to it and highlight whatever the additions are. And then the evaluators are going to focus only on those additions because the rest of it's been graded already. So if there's somewhere where there's a 0 and you need to, and you'll get a copy of your score sheet so you'll know where you fell short. You only need to add to those sections.
If you want the whole thing.
But we want the whole thing back. We need it as a complete document.
Is there some, when it comes up, big yard, for explaining things, better way to explain things, like if it's something like, hey, this, and if you say no, I get 0, right? But, oh no, I can explain that right. This is how it's done. You know,
So if your answer is, let's say, perhaps too vague, and we can't determine, well, maybe they're doing it, but maybe not. Like we're kind of maybe on the fence.
Yeah.
There's still the opportunity for us to give you a call and have an interview, and that's a time for you to tie up some of those loose ends if we haven't.
Okay.
And then, right, and then depending on how substantial that conversation happens to be, we may ask you to, hey, that conversation we just had, type that in there and then send it back to me so that we have it documented. Like we'll try to close all the holes, but we may need you to, if it's enough, we may need you to actually retype that section or resubmit that section. Otherwise, if it's just a little bit and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we had a couple little minor questions, but we were able to clear all that stuff right up, we'll make a couple of notes on the evaluation sheet and that'll cover it.
and if you can attach something that will prove what you've done, that's even going to be better than what you can write and everything else. You can see, they see attachment if it's a budget thing. And the other thing is that the evaluators may call your chief because, any of you can write anything. I mean, we're all good at writing stuff, right? You guys write a lot here lately, so you guys can probably write anything that you want. The thing is that, sometimes we're going to look, because we'll go back and look at that first part where it says how big your department is and all that. If you write that you've got this extravagant budget and everything else, and you're buying all this stuff and doing all that, one of the evaluators may call your chief and say, for real, are they really doing all this and everything else? And they'll say no, or yeah, this is, so it may not be directly to you. They may call your chief or your supervisor to get some verifications on some of the stuff as well. So it may not be directly to you, but we would like to be able to, sometimes they may call you and say, hey, can you explain this? Or we just had one here recently. We sent back to somebody and said, hey, can you expand on this? Because, what you're saying here doesn't meet our criteria. And so then they expanded on it and everything else. And they got the points for it.
When I went through this, I worked on it every month. Every month we had a different section. So I worked on that section while it was still fresh in my head and I knew what I was talking about. At least I hope I did. And so then I was done prior to my submission date and I gave it to my chief. It's like, dude, read this thing over. Let me know what you think before he signs it. And I would encourage all of you to do that to whoever it is that's going to sign off on this thing. Have them read through it. Make sure they agree with everything that you wrote in there, or at least don't disagree operationally. They may not carry all of your same opinions on things, but at least as far as the job goes, make sure that they agree and that they're willing to sign off. Because if we do call and say, hey, you signed off on this thing, like, is all this really accurate? And they start saying no, then it's like, well, dude, you were supposed to review this. Like you signed it. Like that means something. So that's just a suggestion. Keep everybody on the same page. Any other questions? Yeah. Yes. The question was the difference between an OSFM certification and a Pro Board certification. And I feel like we should turn the video off. An OSFM certification means that you have gone through the entire process of testing, sitting through the class, and passed an exam. So that comes from us as the certifying agency of the state. Pro Board, IFSI is the only entity in the state that can issue a Pro Board certificate. And Pro Board actually has more to do with exam security than it does course content. But I know in a lot of our circles, if you're looking to go out of state at some point, they look for a Pro Board certificate. So if your intent is to potentially work out of Illinois, you'll get the Pro Board certification by successfully completing IFSI's program, because that's how they're aligned. And this program is, they got this Pro Board approved already. Okay. Because we do get that from some people that are trying to, as firefighters, leave the state, and they want to go somewhere, and they're like, oh, we have to have Pro Board. It's like, okay, well, how do I get Pro Board if I'm in Illinois? Oh, well, you have to take the class through IFSI. Oh, well, I took my firefighter 2 back in 1995. Well, you can go back and you can do the Pro Board testing to get that certification, but it's more of an exam thing as opposed to a curriculum evaluation. Did I talk around in circles enough to like confuse you just enough to make you think that I answered the question? Okay.
CFO class, Chief Fire Officer class in the state of Illinois is the highest certification that you can get. There's nothing above CFO. So the Pro Board or IFSAC certifications on any of that, plus that you get through IFSI. The state of Illinois at one time was IFSAC approved, and they let it go because it's expensive. As Chris mentioned, it's more on their testing process, security of their testing, whether it's for practical exams or written exams or anything else. So what happens is that it doesn't, you can go somewhere and take a Pro Board class that's 20 hours, and you can go somewhere else and take a Pro Board class that's 80 hours. They don't look at the curriculum. They just looked at are testing everybody on the JPRs for the cognitive and psychomotor in the NFPA standard. And that's all that they truly look at.
Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Going on the same topic a little bit.
That's between the chiefs and SIPC. That I haven't done it. I know my chief did it. And you submit your task book to them. They call you up. From what I understand, it's a fairly grueling interview that you have to go through, and then you pay them $300, something like that, $300, and then you can get that designation.
And I think that you can get an application when the next time you have class, you can get that application to get that process started. Once you've completed it.
Been through that, have you? Okay. Any other questions? I didn't see anything else pop back up on the WebEx, UJC. All right. Well, we are 5 minutes ahead of schedule, which